Slightly different Stav-Tech video to usual, because this one is talking about something that is tuning and is rare and is awesome, but it's probably the most vague, unknown thing I've ever seen. Like, literally, I want to know more on this thing. I know bugger all, but what I do know is probably more than almost everybody watching it, because I'd never seen anything like this before. And doing a bit of Googling sent me down a rabbit hole. So what I'm going to talk about now is the mysterious 16 valve head prototype for the Ford CVH engine. If you don't already know, the Ford CVH is the pretty average inline 4-cylinder engine that was used in the 80s and early 90s in loads of different Fords, front wheel drive and rear wheel drive. It was kind of like the replacement to the Pinto, but not quite. It was mostly known as, or best known as, the 1.68 valve engine in things like XR3s, XR3is, XR2s, XR2is, RS1616is, you know, that stuff. And CVH stands for, I think it's compound valve hemispherical. Basically, it's like a hemispherical head. There's no squish pads on it, but it's not a particularly good engine. 2 valves per cylinder. Really, it's nothing special at all. Some people have made big power relatively from them, but they're fairly average. Anyway, there's also the rear wheel drive version that's bigger capacity. There's also a smaller capacity version as well. I think it goes down to 1.1 or 1.3. I think 1.3. Either way, let's ignore them. But there's a 1.8 CVH, which is rear wheel drive, and it's actually a different block. I'm fairly certain that block isn't even interchangeable with the front wheel drive one. It's got definitely a different bell housing. I'll talk about it a bit later in the story, but it's not well known because just nobody really bothered with them. But everyone just got the 1.6 CVHs and tuned them. And if they wanted big capacity, they'd worked out later on in the years that a Z-Tech bottom end, which can be like 2 litre, could be, with a few modifications, fitted to the CVH head. And they used to call that a ZVH conversion, but still wasn't brilliant. It gave them loads of torque, but you've got a poor flowing head on an even bigger bottom end. So it's a torquey but still not very powerful engine. Anyway, enough of CVHs. That's sort of a tangent. But one day on the internet, I really love sort of prototype and whatever engines, you know, ones that never made it to production. And I saw, and I don't know where I found it. I've googled the shit out of it since and I can't find it anywhere. But somewhere, it was online and it was like social media. It was either Facebook or Instagram. Somewhere, somebody posted up some pictures of some engine parts in a garage. I don't know if it's UK or USA, but some engine parts in a garage. And this person was like, "This is in my friend's garage. Anyone know what this is?" And I'm normally fucking good at this game. And it was a Ford engine, clearly Ford. Some of the cam covers said Ford Motorsport, some just said Ford. But yeah, it was 16 valve engine, but it wasn't a 16 valve head I recognised at all. But that doesn't mean much because it can be a race only engine or a prototype engine or whatever. So it's like, okay, it's not a production head, but I know I've seen you know, prototype Ford 16 valve heads for the Ford Lima engine, as in the 2.3 4-cylinder they got in the USA. It's on like XR4 TIs and Rangers and all kinds of shit, even Mustangs and stuff back in the day. But it wasn't that either. What I normally do, if I see a head that's clearly not production, I try and recognise what it's based on with the block. I look at the block. But the pictures weren't very clear. But it was a cast iron block. And yeah, it was clearly a production block of some sort, just with a prototype head on it. So I thought, you know, I know engines pretty well, especially Fords. So I went through my head, thinking about what the hell this block was, and it didn't really add up to anything. And yeah, I even checked CVH, didn't add up to that either. It just basically didn't add up to fuck all. And the engine in the pictures was, the manifold sort of looked turbo, but I wasn't sure because you couldn't see it all. The inlet manifold was a single throttle EFI setup. It looked a bloody good head, but again, you don't know much. It looked like there was an a turbo oil return pipe in the one picture too, but again, you couldn't even see where it led to, so I couldn't even be sure it was that and not something else. So it was difficult. It was weird because there was two sets of cam covers. One was in a totally different font and said 16 valve injection. Another was in the official like Ford type font that said Ford Motorsport and stuff in it. But yeah, I couldn't work out what it was, but I saved the pictures just in case. Nobody else had a clue. I remember that much. There's people replying with just guesses, and they were just, I could tell they were wrong myself. It was just bollocks. Nobody knew. This guy didn't seem to know. And then because my memory is like a fucking sieve, I don't even remember where I saw that in the end. So, but I saved the pictures, and I kind of forgot about them. And then a few weeks ago, I saw a Spanish person, and it was on a post I'd made about the prototype 20 valve turbo heads that I think it was Oettinger or Oettinger or whatever you spell it, that German tuner. It does a lot of Volkswagen tuning and stuff, and they made like quite a lot of aftermarket heads for Volkswagen stuff. Basically, back before the 20 valve turbo was a production thing, that company made some prototype or a prototype with a 20 valve head, and that's clearly where, you know, the 20 valve turbo thing originated. But anyway, I think it was this Spanish guy, and I'm not even sure he said it in English, or it was just, I think it might have been Facebook auto translate. He said, what about the 16 valve head for the CVH? I think he said the Ford RS1616i head. And it was like, what the fuck? I didn't know what he was on about. I didn't reply. I just was like, okay, that's a bit weird. So I had a Google. Didn't find basically fuck all for a bit. And then I found this one picture. And this one picture is of what's clearly the same head, well, the same cam covers. You can see by the bolt pattern it's the same head as these previous ones I was on about. One cam cover, because two cam covers being on a twin cam engine, a bit like Nissan Skyline heads are and so on. And each cam cover, one says Ford Motorsport and one says RS1616i. It's like, fuck. Okay, this guy wasn't lying. What the fuck's this? And that's like proper official Ford writing. It's not like some shit somebody's made up. You know, that's the proper Ford RS font, and that's the Ford Motorsport font. So I did a bit more digging, and I found an article in, I think it's Classic Ford magazine from a few years ago, and it was this guy called, well, he's called Guido or Guido. How do you spell it? How do you say it? I don't know. German guy. Anyway, he built a Mark III Escort, crazy badass sort of mixture of road car and race car mental thing, with this mythical 16 valve CVH head. And I was like, oh fuck, okay. So, but that block I was looking at, it was definitely the same head, put it that way. But the block in the other pictures was not a CVH block. Well, I thought it wasn't. But that's part of the story in a minute. Anyway, according to this Fast Forward article and this guy, these heads, they made 4 of them. They were made by Schrick, which is another German tuning company. You probably know from cams and so on. But anyway, Schrick supposedly made 4 16 valve heads for Ford as prototype test engine things, and they were tested, it seems, NA, They could rev to 10 grand. Blah, 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 blah. They were good. They were weapons. But I presume because they was developing the Z-Tech engine, which was the replacement for the CVH, it was already 16 valve, Ford decided, no, we're not going ahead with it. And supposedly, according to this story at least, there was 4 made. They were supposed to all be scrapped, and at least 2 of them survived into the wild. And it's like, okay then, fair enough. In some of the pictures, especially when it's this guy in this magazine, the engine looks distinctly is NA. All the pictures look like it's intended to be NA. There's like twin carb or twin throttle body, fuel injection manifold, and blah 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 blah. And obviously it's fitted to transversely mounted front wheel drive Fords. According to the story, at least, they were tested it in Mark II Fiestas or something, so front wheel drive cars, and all this shenanigans. So it's like, okay, fair enough, but that doesn't add up to the pictures I saw, because the pictures I saw, and I've got here, and you can see them on screen, they don't say RS1616i, but it's clearly the same head. They haven't got these sort of individual throttle inlet manifolds, and the block isn't a normal CVH. So I thought, what the fuck is it then? And then, thanks to somebody, because who else would normally do this, because CVHs aren't very loved, I found somebody in America who was comparing the different CVH blocks, because while I didn't know this, and most people don't seem to bloody know this, there is various different CVH blocks. You've got obviously a normal transverse one, but the tall block, as they sometimes call it, because in America the CVHs were in, they made like they had Escort, they looked nothing like ours, and they were 1.9 litre and a bit shit. They use this supposedly tall block. I can't remember if that tall block is the same as the rear wheel drive block or not. Anyway, what it was, there was various blocks, and I can't remember if it was the tall block only or if the tall block is this rear wheel drive block, but whatever the case is, it has got a different bell housing than the normal CVH blocks we're used to. And it turned out that's what I was seeing in that picture of the supposedly turbo engine, and that's why I didn't recognise the block. It's like the block's wrong because the bell housing is way different. But on these rear wheel drive or tall blocks, whatever the hell it is, CVH ones, it is that bell housing. It's much bigger, it's much rounder than the normal one. So yeah, so that head in the picture is fitted to a CVH. It's a different sump and everything too, it turns out, but yeah, it's still a CVH, but not a CVH as we know it. The bell housing is completely different, and the one, that's what caught me out in this picture, and that's what nobody knew what it was. It's a tall block CVH, so 1.9 litre, 2 litre, whatever, with a prototype 16 valve head and fuel injection, and just like I suspected, that was a turbo oil return, so it's clearly a turbo engine. They was, a 16 valve CVH turbo engine they was prototyping, probably in America. There's supposedly one of 4. I don't know. I don't know the truth in this, because they said they only made 4, but they also said they were only tested in bloody Ford Fiestas. But this clearly wasn't. This is in America, and it's a 16 valve turbo one. That is the oil return. That goes to exactly where the oil return hole is on a CVH. That's 100% a CVH block, the rear wheel drive, the tall block, whatever the hell you want to call it. But what it was ever fitted in America and what it was tested with, I have no idea. But what I do know is it's fucking awesome, and probably about the rarest engine there is. I bet you there's only one of them. Well, if it's true that they made 4 heads, there's this Guido, whatever his name is, owns one. There's another one in the UK he says he knows of. That would be 2. Where's the other 2? Supposedly, they were all meant to be scrapped. This turbo one is somewhere, I think probably America, but I'm not sure. And yeah, basically, it's awesome, but that's all I know. And that's probably wow, apart from the people who own these things, or maybe the people who worked on these projects back in, like, this would be the late 80s, early 90s, I'm guessing. Apart from these people, and half of them I probably forgot, nobody seems to know. Because like I said, all the stories about it seem to suggest completely different from what I've deduced from these pictures and research. So, also, and again, I'll try and show you in pictures or maybe clips or whatever, but the 1.9 block looks way stronger. It's got loads of webbing. It looks like quite a fucking beast. So it's like, interesting. That block looks stout as hell. And with a 16 valve head, that looks really good, and a turbo, it would have been a weapon. But does anyone know any more about this engine? Because I have no idea. I know it's cool, but do I know anything else about it? This is literally all I've learned from it. I just thought I'd let you know and show you this very weird, very interesting prototype head that I don't think anyone truly knows the story of, despite maybe thinking they do, because I certainly don't, and everything I've read don't add up with what I've seen. So yeah, it's way more interesting than it might seem. And yeah, I want to see the results of this 1.9 turbo version of this engine, not just because the 1.6 NA version supposedly rev to 10,000 and were fucking awesome. Imagine the 1.9 turbo version. I want some of that. But anyway, that's enough Stav's weird things he's found on the internet about engines and geeky shit, and probably back to normal tuning my MR2 stuff for the next video. Ta-da.